So you just got a deal under contract. Congratulations. But how do you feel? If you're noticing that excitement is quickly turning into anxiety, you are not alone. The weight of making all the decisions and the reality of putting out all that cash can come with a lot of emotions that are less than positive. But if you're new here, hi, I'm Sabrina and I'm failing forward in real estate to build a more durable life. And I've bought several properties over the past few years. And today is closing day on my most recent rental. So in this video, I'm going to talk about what I've been doing up to closing and what I do right after closing to hit the ground running. So a little bit of background, I got this deal from a wholesaler. So I was on one of their email lists. I saw the deal. It was in the zip code I wanted. And so we went back and forth and finally negotiated the price. I went to the property and did a walkthrough inspection and signed the purchase agreement and wired the $5,000 EMD payment. I initially had about 2 weeks, but the seller needed more time, and so they pushed the closing another 10 days, which gave me 3 weeks. You don't always get this much time, but I got to work. The first thing on my list was to get contractor estimates. So up until signing the contract, I simply was using the square footage and the general condition of the house, which was not in bad condition at all, to come up with my initial estimate. And so what I wanted to do before closing was to confirm these numbers. So the way that I did that is I actually started in contractor Facebook groups. I don't have a go-to contractor in the area. I do have my husband, and we worked on houses together up until this point, but we were really trying to, leverage new relationships and a network. And so I got into the Facebook groups and posted that I was looking for someone who could do the work in terms of paint. We were also considering adding a half bathroom. So I posted that and waited for the responses. And to my surprise, they flooded in. So I wanted to have something more structured. I needed to be able to give the contractor something so that they could give me some ballpark estimates. And I needed this to happen virtually, right? I wasn't going to be able to have all of these people come and walk the house before I closed on it, before I was the official owner, because the sellers were still moving out. And so I used the pictures from the walkthroughs and some videos that I had taken, and I put together a simple Word document for the scope of work. And so it, specified how big the house is, the number of bedrooms in the bathroom, the repairs that I could see through the walkthrough, the general overview of, we wanted this painted, we're thinking about this for flooring, and we are trying to make the decision about this half bathroom and exactly, what the specifications. We just wanted a small half bath to see what those estimates were going to be. One of the things that I really emphasized in these communications with the contractors is that I know that these are just ballpark estimates. I just needed something that was going to give me some confirmation that the estimates that I had in my mind were going to be the numbers that matched up in reality. And I really found that I needed to make that message very clear because contractors don't really like to make quotes without actually walking the property. But like I said, I needed them to be willing to do some kind of virtual estimate. Many of them were. One thing that I did notice is, it kind of funneled down, right? So the number of people who initially responded, and then the number of people who actually gave me their email address, and then the number of people who actually responded with a quote, those numbers kept getting smaller and smaller. So don't be surprised if you don't get responses from everyone because that is unlikely to happen. So I got those initial estimates and I was like, okay, so some of these people are much, much higher than I thought. And some of them are kind of right in the general area that I was thinking. So I was able to have some indication that what I was estimating was going to ultimately be what was going to be the price in reality after we did the walkthroughs. So the second thing that I was trying to figure out in this time between signing the contract and closing was property management. So once again, I don't have a go-to property manager. This is my first rental in this new market and actually my first time using property management. I've only self-managed up until this point. And so what I did for this is all of the agent calls that I had done previously, I have another video about that. Some of those agents indicated that they are property managers. And so that was my first initial list of a handful of people that I emailed to ask, I got this property and I just wanted to confirm that you do property management and if you would be willing to do a walkthrough when I do close. I got a couple of positive responses from that. A couple of people told me that they didn't do property management, so I guess I noted that wrong when I was doing my agent calls. And then what I did was, as I've been doing my agent follow-up, I changed the message in those emails to ask for recommendations. And so then I also got a few property management referrals from those agent follow-up emails. And one other channel, I think I may have done something on Bigger Pockets because I also got like an auto text reply that also connected me with another property manager that I was able to reach out to. So like I say, kind of a mix of different things, checking back in with the agents that I'd connected with who do property management themselves, using that same group of agents to get referrals, and then also leveraging the Bigger Pockets network, which I think got me like one referral in the area. So that was what I did. And again, for those who gave me a positive response, I then asked, would you be willing to come to the house and walk it on the day of closing, which was going to give me an opportunity to be able to meet some people face to face, get a vibe, and see how this relationship was going to work and which one I'm ultimately going to decide on. The next number of calls that I was making was to banks. Now, I know this sounds weird that I was calling banks after I was under contract. And if you are using a bank to make the purchase, you should certainly have your lender lined up before you really start making serious offers. But I intend to BRRRR this property. And so I'm buying it in cash. And then on the back end, I want to be able to refinance out hopefully most of my costs. And I wanted to get a sense of what kind of lenders might be helpful and useful in that kind of second leg of this strategy. Because I tried the local bank route and I don't think that's going to work for this first project, especially if you want to refinance out before a year. So I just started making these calls to get an idea of, well, this is the second leg of this strategy. Is what I'm thinking actually going to work? And unfortunately, I am learning that the closing costs are going to be probably much higher than I originally thought. And so that's certainly something that I'm taking into consideration, but good to know on the front end now instead of being blindsided by this, months down the road when I'm ready to make this step. All right, and so the last few calls that I made are things that are really important, but sometimes easy to overlook. And the first one is the utilities. You definitely want to make sure that you understand how to turn on utilities for your new property, because lots of cities, counties, municipalities do things differently. And so you want to be able to get the information you need to be able to turn on your utilities. Now, I have utilities set to be turned on today for closing, but that is because it is a very livable house that the seller and his family were living in up until this point. Now, for houses that are not really habitable, so for especially a flip property, you do not want to turn on the utilities until you know it is safe to do so. You do not want to just get the water turned back on and then show up to the property and it's flooded because something was broken or missing and you didn't know. So turn on the utilities if you know that it is safe and that they are usable, because then that just means that you don't have to do walkthroughs in the dark. So the last thing that's easy to overlook happens right on closing day. So all of these other things, the contractor estimates, property management, figuring out the banks if that's something that you're going to need longer term, getting the utilities on. This is all as we come up to today. But today is closing day, and today is when we wire the money for the purchase. And so what I recommend is that the paperwork for whatever bank, lender, however you are purchasing your property, that you know what their process is for getting this money for closing wired in on time. Because what I have found is that you need to send the wire in by a certain time in the day for it to actually be able to be transferred the same day. And it's not just before the bank closes. So for example, for me, it's always early afternoon. So I need to make sure that all of the final walkthroughs, so I was able to coordinate a kind of virtual walkthrough this morning. And so once I was able to get that and knew that the property was still there and in the condition that I was expecting it to be in, I was ready to wire the money. But if you have any extra security things or checks that your bank requires that you go through, you don't want to get to the day of closing and realize that you have some extra steps to go through. Because like I said, it usually requires a few hours before the bank closes to be able to send wires. So if you want to make sure that, your actual recording date is the correct date, make sure that you just reach out to the bank if you've never used them before for this kind of transaction. Just make sure you understand the process so that you are not blindsided or scrambling on the day of closing. Another very important, but seemingly small and very easy to forget piece is confirm what you're going to do about keys. You need to know whether the keys are going to be with the closing attorney or title company, whether they're going to be on the property in a lockbox or somewhere else. So just make sure, especially you are the buyer, it will be really important that you have a very clear plan of what you're going to do about keys. So this is just as simple as, coordinating either with the wholesaler, the agent, or the seller if that's how you're buying it. Just make sure you know how to enter the property once it is yours. So there's one more thing that I wanted to mention, and this happens a day or two before closing, and that is reading your closing disclosure. So some important things to check for: that they have the correct purchase price, that they've accurately documented whatever EMD that you've paid, that they're actively capturing wholesale fees if you owe them. And you also want to check for taxes. So you are going to have to pay estimated taxes for the rest of the year from the time that you own the property. So the day of closing until the end of the year, they're going to estimate out what taxes you're going to owe. But from the day of closing to the beginning of the year, that's what the seller is required, because that's when they own the property. And so you want to make sure that these tax lines make sense. One way that you can check is usually if you go to the county website, you can do a tax bill search. And so you can confirm whether or not the seller has paid their taxes, or if they're getting to the closing table and that needs to be sorted out with the monies that they're going to get from the sale. So that's just something, again, easy to overlook, but I would recommend that you check the county records, make sure that what you're seeing on that closing disclosure, that's a hard thing to say. What you're seeing on the closing disclosure matches what you're seeing on the tax bill website. And if it doesn't, just reach out to the title company or your closing attorney to make sure that that information is correct. And I want to emphasize this reaching out because checking these numbers is your responsibility. Because remember, humans work in these offices, fallible humans. And I can certainly tell you that there have been times where I've had wholesale fees that were accidentally duplicated, which meant that I would have had to pay thousands extra at closing, which might be easy to overlook if you're already paying tens or hundreds of thousands anyway. And so you really want to check the numbers on that closing disclosure because, again, in my experience, it is much easier to send the money in than to get that money back. So take it from someone who has made the mistake and didn't read every single line and accidentally sent too much money to closing. It took a day to send the money out and it took months for me to get that extra money back. So read your closing disclosure closely and make sure all of the lines match up and you know exactly how much money you need to send in to the closing table. Well, this is where I am. The documents are all signed, the money is wired, and now the real work begins. So come with me as I walk the house as the new owner, and I will show you exactly what I'm doing right after closing to finalize my plan. I'll see you at the house. Okay, welcome to the house. We closed yesterday and we just drove down here this morning, and so come with me as we take our first walk through the house as the new owners. Go ahead, baby girl. What is that? You know what that is? I don't know what that goes to. Closet. Oh. Very stylish. Oh. The wooden room. And here's the last one. Yeah. Lots and lots of holes, but not a big deal. Easy to, those are easy to deal with. Okay, so when you're walking the house, you want to do at least one pass where you're not too distracted by the things that are going to make the house pretty. What you want to know from the beginning is your main systems, like your plumbing, the electricity, the HVAC, the roof, the crawl space. You really want to get a sense of these big ticket items for your house. So we're going to take a look underneath cabinets so we can look at some plumbing, taking note of like outlets and switches and things like that. So come this way. So obviously you want to make sure like that your stuff works. Oh, safety locks on here. But you want to get a good idea of what's going on. Shia, they can't see. Excuse me. Of what your plumbing looks like, making sure you're not having any leaks. And you want to do that for everything that you got plumbing for. So we're going to do the same thing in the bathroom. Again, making sure she works and seeing what that looks like. It's also not a bad idea to sit on the toilet and make sure it doesn't rock, because your toilet can also leak, which is not a good thing. And the same thing in the shower. Oh, this way. So yeah, you want to have, go ahead, Bubba. An initial test that the plumbing is okay, that the water is looking good, that you're not seeing any immediate leaks, because those are going to be the big headaches. We can spend the time to make the things look pretty, but you got to make sure that you're solid in terms of your systems for the house. Welcome back. It's the next day, and we've done a lot since yesterday, between yesterday and today. So the first thing that we did is that we opened up all these windows. The house was real funky when we walked in. And then we prepared for our walkthroughs with various property managers and contractors. And these walkthroughs are a really important part of why we're here, which is to confirm our assumptions that we made from the initial walkthrough when we were going under contract for the house, and to really finalize what the plan is going to be to get this rent ready. So the other thing that was important is that the property managers came before the contractors because, one, I wanted to get their insights on the things that stuck out to them that we should address. And it also gave me an opportunity to meet them face to face, because I don't yet have a property management company in mind. And so it was nice to be able to meet people, shake their hands, and hear their insights. We also then were able to kind of learn new things and sort of point stuff out as the contractors did their walkthroughs, so then they can also finalize those estimates that they gave me initially, but those were just based on pictures and a few walkthrough videos. So now we can finally get those more concrete estimates and quotes. So for the most part, what we assumed seems to be confirmed. We didn't see any big red flags or anything major that was missed, which was great. But there were a couple of things that definitely came to our attention. It's something that happened out back. So one thing would be the pickets up, the HVAC just cut on. It's a little chilly out here. So we're definitely gonna need to fill this in. I missed that the first time. And this also was a bit of a surprise. I didn't realize we were gonna have a bonus chicken coop. So that's definitely something that we want to take into consideration. One rookie mistake that I did make when I was doing the walkthrough is that I did not account for needing new appliances. When I walked this house the first time before we went under contract, the appliances were here. And I didn't make a note that they either were going to be gone when we actually closed or they weren't going to be in usable condition. And that's ultimately what happened. When we got here, the fridge and the microwave were gone, and we fired up the stove and it smokes and doesn't work properly. So I'm gonna need a whole appliance suite. Now, it probably makes sense to just always assume that you're going to need new appliances if you're buying a house that needs some updating, but I completely overlooked it, and now we're definitely going to need to provide a whole new suite of brand new appliances before this will be rent ready. So make sure that you always assume new appliances when you're putting your numbers together. One other really important thing that you want to do when you're checking out your kitchen is to confirm the cabinets. So these cabinets don't look that bad, and so we're actually going to leave them. We're going to clean them up, but we are going to leave these cabinets. I wish I would have done this when I did the initial walkthrough, but sometimes when you're walking a house with a seller, you can feel a bit nervous because you're kind of invading their space, which is an issue that I hope to overcome more and more, hopefully as I get more properties. But what you want to do is you need to make sure that all of the cabinets and drawers are functional, because it can get pricey very quickly, especially when you've got the original cabinets, if anything needs to be changed because it doesn't work. So just because they look good, you've got to test them out to make sure they're actually functional. And I mean every single one. Okay, so I'm gonna show you exactly why you need to check each one of these for functionality right now. So you see the whole bottom of this cabinet has fallen in, so we're gonna need to repair that. Good thing is it's not on the doors, so those still work, but definitely can't have a cabinet with the bottom falling out. Another important thing you want to check are your outlets and your switches. Now, we've done lots of walkthroughs in this house and we've turned on all the lights, so we know all the switches work. But to check your outlets, you can use one of these simple testers. They're really inexpensive, and you put them into each of the outlets and it will tell you based on these codes if the outlet is functioning and wired correctly. So all you have to do is pop it in, and that double yellow is what you're looking for. So you're going to do that test with every single outlet. And so there are a couple that I can't actually get this into, which probably means it's going to be hard to plug something else into it. So definitely going to want to know any of these that are difficult or when the code doesn't show up the right way. I finished all the checks of the outlets. And so now that we've checked the outlets, the switches, the cabinets, and we've done multiple walkthroughs with property managers and contractors, we're about ready to leave. We have all the information that we need to make our final decisions and to finalize our plan to get this property rent ready. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful, as you can see exactly what I did before and then right after closing. So we're going to finalize this plan to get this property rent ready, and I will see you on the next one with our next update.